In Gaza itself, the situation is growing more and more desperate at hospitals in the north of the Strip, surrounded by fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas, which many countries have designated a terrorist group. Operations have been suspended at Al-Shifa Hospital after fuel ran out. Palestinian officials say at least one baby had died and 39 others were at risk of dying after the last generator powering incubators and ventilators shut down. Troops and tanks are also reported to have taken up positions near the Nasr and Rantisi children's hospitals and the Indonesian and Al-Quds hospitals, which have come under fire despite the thousands of civilians sheltering there. Kiran Moodley has this report, which some of you may find upsetting.
In these darkest of times in northern Gaza, you need a torch to say goodbye to a loved one. At the Al-Quds hospital, the lights have gone out. And at Al-Shifa, today they ran out of water and food and suspended operations. This was before the power went out, and when it did, 3 babies died in the neonatal unit. This was the scene at the Indonesian hospital. As the fighting encircles Gaza City, hospitals in the north are ever closer to the front line, and doctors in the south are struggling to communicate.
Nothing happened like this before. There is direct targeting of the hospital buildings. So our colleagues there, they barely communicate with the outside community. They are feeling that like they are facing death without any help and support.
The Israeli Defense Forces continue to release images of the ground offensive. They say they are not firing on Al-Shifa Hospital, but that there are clashes nearby. Hamas in turn published their own footage, revealing an attack on Israeli soldiers stationed in a building in North Gaza. As these two sides exchange fire and propaganda, civilians flee down the main road approved for evacuations. Among them, this newly born baby girl. Her grandmother says she was born at Al-Shifa and they then fled just hours later. A reminder that while this baby is not injured, back at the hospital, more than 30 are at risk.
The road is all suffering that the devil itself won't think of. I've never witnessed something like this. I don't know where we're going. This is displacement. Where are they taking us? To Sinai?
But as he and others head south, this is the scene there. The aftermath of an airstrike in Rafah. This is what is concerning Israel's allies, with the French president calling for an end to the fighting, saying Israel must stop killing babies and women.
I think this is the only solution we have, this ceasefire, because it's impossible to explain we want to fight against terrorism by killing innocent people.
But that call isn't being repeated by Israel's other key allies, but by Arab and Muslim nations meeting in Riyadh today. This summit saw 57 leaders, among them Syria's Bashar al-Assad, who's killed thousands of his own civilians, issue a joint statement condemning Israel's aggression. And the Saudi Crown Prince welcomed Iran's president, a rare visit and a show of how the Palestinian cause is, for now, a unifier.
Today, the unity of the Islamic nation, the unity of Islamic countries is very important. One of the reflections of this summit will be this unity.
Benjamin Netanyahu won't hear any of that. He met wounded soldiers in Ashkelon as he vows to destroy Hamas. But he knows that as his forces push further into Gaza City, there will be more Israelis killed. And he's under pressure from his own people, who are calling on the hostages to be released, and that may only happen if there is some sort of pause in fighting. The death toll in Gaza is now more than 11,000. As the grief mounts, the demonstrations in London and beyond grow too. Protests and prayers. But will it all eventually put pressure on both Israel and Hamas to cease fire?
Well, let's go live to our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Secunda Kamani in Tel Aviv. Secunda, tell us the very latest now.
Well, Kathy, I've been speaking in the last hour or so to a senior doctor at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Of course, we're not allowed, as foreign journalists, to travel inside the Gaza Strip independently, so I spoke to him over the phone. You could hear gunshots ringing out in the background, and he described a horrific scene, as you heard in that report, with barely any fuel, water or electricity. And he said that more than 30 babies had to be taken out of their incubators and moved into an open operating theatre to try and keep them warm because they weren't able to keep the neonatal unit open. He also said there are around 100 corpses in the courtyard that they wanted to bury, but they're unable to do so because they're worried that anyone stepping outside could be shot. And he said that there are around 10,000 people still around the hospital compound. That's far fewer than there had been up until the last few days, but of course still a very, very large number. Meanwhile, Israel, for its part, says that yes, there is fighting and heavy clashes taking place in the area around the hospital, but it denies targeting it, and it says that anyone who wants to leave is able to do so. It also says that it's successfully evacuated 2 other smaller hospitals in northern Gaza. Meanwhile, here in Israel, you've got big demonstrations taking place right across the country with people calling for the safe return of those hostages who have been taken by Hamas. I think the mounting pressure on Israel over the civilian casualties will eventually result in some kind of reduction in fighting at least, but it's not clear when that point is going to come.
Sikander, thanks very much. Well, as Sikander mentioned there, we can't get into Gaza ourselves, but filmmaker Youssef Hamash has been sending us powerful eyewitness reports of what's been happening there. He also works for the Norwegian Refugee Council. I spoke to him earlier and asked about the situation at Al-Shifa Hospital.
Now the Israeli army is a few meters away from Al-Shifa Hospital, and actually it's surrounding Al-Shifa Hospital from 3 areas. I understood from our colleagues who are stayed in Al-Shifa Hospital that they cannot even move inside the Shifa between buildings inside because there is a lot of snipers around it, and there is, there's surveillance with drones 24 hours.
Given the situation with the hospitals, what happens now when people are injured, when people are sick? What toll is all this taking?
And today we managed to get one of our colleagues. When we arrived to the hospital, we couldn't find a place, not a bed, couldn't find a place in the corridor for him. Yeah, just a place for him to take a rest for 5 minutes. We couldn't find it, and unfortunately, he got injured 4 days ago. And imagining that he didn't get any medical treatment after his injuries until today.
And you've all been told to move from the north, to move south. We've seen the pictures in the north, utter destruction. What does it look like in the south now? What are you seeing around you?
People who arrived to the southern part, today I was there and I was asking questions for others. Where are you going? No one knows. They are just going without knowing where they are going. They're just trying to save their lives. Now people are in the streets. It's really common now. You see people sleeping in the streets.
You're surrounded by this desperation, destruction, death, terrible scenes. You're working and yet you're also grieving for people you've lost. I just wonder how you're coping.
How we are coping now is there is no other option. This is the only option we have. We have responsibilities towards our family, trying to facilitate our living conditions. We are not coping, we are forced to find solutions.
You put out a very sad tweet because your home's been destroyed, and yet you said you wanted to return to it, even if it was to sleep in the rubble. Just take us through what was going through your head at that point.
We are a heavy burden. There is no capacity in the south. There is no enough space. There is no places. It's a humiliated situation, honestly. So I prefer to sleep on the rubble of my house than what we are seeing here. I don't think I can describe it, but we became mentally ill. All of us, we are facing very hard mental condition. What makes us standing is our responsibilities toward our children, and I don't know until when our energy will finish. No one on this planet again can handle what's going on.
Well, when you hear Emmanuel Macron, for example, or the US in some ways criticizing Israel for the extent of civilian casualties, does that give you hope, or do you feel that the world is leaving you to your fate?
What Macron said gave hope for Gazans. Imagine how they are desperate. If this just a statement gave them hope, because there is no other news. We don't know what's going on.
Youssef Hamash, thank you very much.